Not yet. I'm looking here. I see mute. I see only meeting organizers, more actions, turn income video, keypad, turn on all captions, full screen. I don't see.
Okay.
Wait,
So George, maybe what we will do in your case, since you can't locate the chat button, we'll have you tell us where you're joining in from.
Okay, I live in the south of France, where close to Cannes, where they have the film festival. And that's it. I've been here for the last 30 years. I'm originally from the United States, as you can tell from my accent, but I've worked in 55 countries and visited 72. So I'm happy that COVID made me stay at home a little bit. Amen.
And George, I think you forgot to tell everybody that you are a member of the Gen Z, right?
Yes, I'm only 85 years old.
Yeah, and eternally Gen Z.
I love you, Lakshmi.
Love you, George. Love you.
Okay. So with all this love and energy, I'm going to ask Saideep, can you mute everybody except the panelists and me for the moment? So there is no echo, and I'm going to begin. Welcome everyone to CITAR India's panel discussion on Gen Z in India. And for the benefit of those who are attending a CITAR event for the first time, CITAR stands for the Society for Intercultural Education, Training and Research. And CITAR India is part of a network of CITARs all around the world. And we serve as a kind of think tank, a forum and a network. And you just met George Simons, one of the pillars of the CITARs globally. Yeah, and I think we are a forum for all of those who are deeply committed to understanding differences and bridging them, be they intercultural or intracultural, and hence the topic of our discussion today. And who better to moderate it other than our very own founder, board member, Dr. Lakshmi Kumar, whose career spans 30 years in the field of education, social work, and intercultural education, right? So in terms of time, she's a real colossus, and she's rightly placed because she has a finger very much on the pulse of Gen Z, and not just Gen Z in India, but globally, because her geographical expertise spreads from Solapur, which is a tier 2 city in India, right till Sweden, because she again organizes Indo-Swedish partnerships and exchanges. And before I hand it over to Lakshmi, so that she can context the topic and introduce the panelists, I would like to just remind you all that this is a format of a panel discussion, and we are going to and Lakshmi is going to, forward her question. I'm going to ask questions of the panelists, and we will stay in that mode, with our cameras off and with our microphones off till about 7:15 IST. This discussion is being recorded, and at about 7:15, we will really invite you to just open up and, feel free to actually engage with our panelists. Now, throughout, from now till about 7:15, it doesn't mean that you're going to be just passive. We invite you to keep engaging with us on chat. Please keep sending in your comments, your observations, your questions. We are keeping a track on them, and we will make sure that they get answered. So over to you, Lakshmi.
Thank you, Sunita, for this wonderful introduction, and good evening, good morning to everyone. Oh my God, I sound like some Pune, radio Mirchi or something, but what a lovely topic to discuss. Given that India has amongst the youngest populations in the world, today's panel discussion is mainly to explore the values of Gen Z in India, and of course at the global context, and how they relate to the rest of the world, higher education and workplace. Thank you, Dolon and Ipsita, for giving us this lead so that we could actually pitch in this at a very, very timely manner. So just for all of us to get the clarity, known as Gen Z, Generation Z, born between 1995 and 2012. I mean, they're just about 10 years old, but you know what it is to have a 10-year-old in your classroom. They are known for redefining political movements, religion, popular culture, including social distancing and more. So according to a 2019 Bloomberg report, Gen Z made up of 32% of the global population and a staggering 472 million in India. So this self-reliant generation raised by Gen X is vastly different from the meandering millennials. They would choose skills over paycheck, experiences over career, or we need to wait and hear from the panelists whether these are all cliches or how do they experience them. If Gen Z were a brand, it still has to acquire the quality. I guess the sociologists are still figuring out this generation. According to Shiv Vishwanathan, eminent social scientist and director Center for the Study of Knowledge Systems, he says Gen Z is part hypothesis, part fiction, and part reality. He almost says that they're launched, but not yet quite arrived. And we all know that this breed is very well informed and they do not accept anything on its face value. And who better than the three distinguished panelists who can throw light on from a very, very different perspective and all equally important. So we have our first panelist, Nirooban Rupathevan. Warm welcome to you, Niru. And it was wonderful connecting with you for a small chat. Niru heads HR BNB Paribas GSO. He is co-leading diversity and inclusion career development for BNB Paribas in India. And he started his career in the head office of BNB Paribas Security Services in France. And he's also a chartered fellow of the Chartered Institute of Personal Development. And my dear friend, Anita, thank you so much for agreeing to be part of the panelists. And she is actually a very, very well-known academician with PhD in marketing and MCOM and MS in psychotherapy and counseling and postgraduate diploma in psychological counseling. She is the founder director of Symbiosis School of Liberal Arts and has led the institute since its inception in 2011. As a pioneer educator of liberal arts and education in India, she is the only Indian representative and founder member of the Alliance of Asian Liberal Arts Universities. And my dear student, it's so wonderful to have you, Aryaman. And you are actually representing the Gen Z. I know you have to bear the cross today, but I'm sure you would represent and bring in a perspective. And he is a class 12 student of the Orchid School, and he is the co-founder of awakenindia.co.in, an organization to promote awareness of Indian culture. He just gave a wonderful TED talk, which is soon going to be out, a TEDx speaker, and he's also has been a winner of Times of India, Right India Junior Context. And I've seen him as a happy-go, young, lucky, very balanced young man. So my first open question to all three of you, and you can take your turn and kind of dwell into this, is what are some of the core values of Gen Z as you experience it from your location, from the workforce point of view, from the higher education point of view, from a student point of view? And what kind of common features do you identify with Gen Z India and in a global context? Over to you, Niru.
Okay. Thank you, first of all, Lakshmi, for this introduction, and thank you, Sunita, for your invitation to be part of this panel. Welcome to all our audience today, and I'm pleased to be with Dr. Anita and also Aryaman on this discussion today. What we see is that, of course, at our level, we are managing a lot of Gen Z, as part of our workforce. We've also been part of an interesting presentation done by a senior partner from Korn Ferry. And reading also through the research and our experience of Gen Z in India, what we see is that in terms of this is a generation which is looking for hyper personalization, and they also enjoy a lot of flexibility. they clearly want to make an impact, on the society. They like also anything which is in a way immediate gratification. I see that, at the workplace where, when good work is done or when things are happening, they would like, to be at the forefront, get the visibility, get the exposure. I think there's a perception that basically that they are special. This is something that we see. And also, I think they've been living in a very hyper-personalized environment, right? Like when you take Netflix, when you take your fitness app, when you take, even your clothing, all of this can be tailored, right? Immediate gratification is coming also from the outside world, whether you take your Uber, your Zomato, all your apps are now all completely, fine-tuning everything to you, right? We could see that at the workplace, like since I'm representing, a corporate, what we see is that there has been really a real phenomena of big quit, that we also call the big resignation, where I think people have been self-reflecting, reprioritizing, really thinking about what is their role. And that has been, one of the feature, of this value system. So if I have to summarize some of the things that we've seen in the workplace, I think they really value the simplicity. Things needs to be meaningful as to the why they are doing something, which is similar, to the Y generation we had. This is the culture of immediacy. They like the attention. They like I see that at the workplace when we call someone by their name, although we are managing a big volume of staff, that's appreciated. They like informality, like to have also, face-to-face engagement. They want to ensure that they are well paid. Reward is something very important, and work-life balance I think is very important. In a context like us, doing overtime, staying longer is not something that they would be looking forward, because this is a generation that's paying a lot of attention, and I see that in India, being there for the past 5 years now, working here, that work-life balance is much more important than the previous generation that we've seen. So that will be my feedback. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I can actually recognize, my God, some of it is so true even in the school stage. So I wonder what are you getting into, Anita?
I could actually see when you were speaking that these are some of my students. Though, Lakshmi, I need to put in I don't know, a disclaimer, maybe a very strong word, but I do feel that Gen Z is not a unified cultural value we see across. At the School for Liberal Arts, for example, we have students who come in from very diverse backgrounds. And the geographies from where they come, the socioeconomic backgrounds from which they come, sometimes their gender, all of these have played a role. So actually, if you ask me, I don't see one common
generalization.
Exactly. But what I try to do is, amongst all of these diverse groups, what is it that I'm seeing more and more and more of in a larger number of students? So, of course, I should also say that I am comparing this with my previous employment teaching at the undergrad and the postgrad at the Pune University, because the School for Liberal Arts, you might say, and you wouldn't be wrong, gets a particular kind of student, gets a particular kind of student who wants to come in and ask questions. So when Nirooban said, the why is very important, then, they kind of self-select themselves. But if you ask me off the cuff, based on all my experiences, I would say a couple of things. I think the need to believe that they have an increasing amount of freedom to think and make choices, and that they can negotiate for agency, I think is very important for them. I think this is the first thing that has always struck me in these past so many years, is that they feel the need, and it's an emotional need. It's a very strong need. They get very agitated when they believe that they're not being given freedom to choose. And we see this in classrooms. We see this with teachers giving assignments. We see this with the kind of courses we offer, or the kind of activities, or when it comes to choosing internships. The need to have the freedom to negotiate, to suggest, to have an impact on the way a college or a faculty is designing the program. I have never experienced this with any other set of students. Number two, I realized that while they are technology dependent, actually it's less technology dependent and more internet and social media dependent. Many of them still struggle with an Excel, just like I do. So I think the whole technology thing could be a little misleading. I think internet services, what Nirooban said is absolutely true. The whole app, culture, social media. But one good thing that I see at the higher education space is that this has automatically told them there are multiple sources for getting information, and there are multiple resources that you can look at. And when we don't offer that on our own as teachers, they are very quick, and they love that, right? Is that I have something to offer so that somebody else will have a better life. And so therefore, they're very happy to do homework and give these resources to teachers, so multiple resources, especially online. I think for them, online is a part of them. I think it's like an extension of themselves. I don't think they see a choice. While they talk about work-life balance and detoxing from the digital, I think it's very much embedded in the way they study, the way they learn, the way they connect, the way they communicate with their friends. And while all of this is going in, with all those apps that the commercial world has given them, it's had a great spillover into the way they learn. So self-learning is very important for them. Self-directed learning is very important for them. Hands-on learning. I want to get my hands messy. I want to work with experiments. Experiential learning with a great amount of autonomy to decide exactly what. So give me the broad structure. I will be able to decide within that. And to do that, I'm ready to do research. But giving me choices allows me to learn much more. The need to question why am I doing this? And I think this is also something that I've seen, especially in the last 10 years, is that if you tell them why you have to study something, they're happier and more effective at learning. And I think for all these years as teachers, we never did that, right? We told them this is important. But why is it important? Why is it important for different people? So I think the need to question, the need to understand why, the need to also realize that, the world is changing so fast that what held good 10 years ago and 15 years ago may not necessarily be the best way. And therefore, I think that they're having more conversations about what does it mean to be educated. Can you get a degree and not be educated? What does it mean to be cultured? What does it mean to be woke? And they're questioning that word woke also, because I think they're also looking around them and seeing that it's easy to spout and to like something on Insta, but when it actually comes to living it, lived experiences that you see of people don't necessarily reflect the way they support. So I think there's a whole lot of very critical conversations and discussions they're having amongst themselves, and this is across the board and also in classrooms, etc. I think simultaneously there's a practicality that has come in, and especially after the pandemic, even more so, that they've realized that while all of this is wonderful and we need to discuss and be aware of what's happening in the world and what's happening with DE&I, and we need to support a whole lot of movements, they've also realized that the pandemic threw the world out of sync. Family structures are changing, parents might have lost their jobs, the economies are not doing as well as they used to do. And therefore I see three things. Number one is they are actually becoming more practical. I see this now in the last 5 years. Very practical choices, for example, on major minor areas of specializations. There are students who will say, I'm going to study a philosophy, but I'm also going to do, for example, in economics, because I think that's where jobs might come from. And who knows in the next few years, the way I look at a job and the way I look at employment and the way I look at revenue and salaries may change. Okay. I think they've also realized that the classroom needs to be connected to the outside world. And therefore, I see them seeking internships. We make one mandatory. They want to do 2 and they want to do 3. We've got one volunteering opportunity mandatory. I see on an average students doing a large amount. They want to meet startup entrepreneurs and they want to meet people in the social sector. And they're very keen to look at all of this because I think they've also realized these are sectors that their parents didn't look at as potential employment or entrepreneurial avenues, but they are. And I think that practicality of I can do something good, but I also want to make money. I want to do something good, but I also want to be comfortable is something that I think they sit very well with. So the whole value for money, what are my returns on education? All of these are conversations they're very happy to have. Either they will initiate it or they will participate in it. And finally, something that Nirooban will notice, I assume, is the whole you have to keep learning, unlearn, relearn. You have to skill yourself. You have to upskill at from some point of time. So the whole suddenly I'm seeing students doing a lot of online courses, online certification. They're learning a lot of things in the last 5 years that they didn't. And when you ask them, they say, it's always good to have these tools and techniques and certifications. Makes you feel a little stronger, makes you a little more emotionally confident of making choices. That if I need something to fall back on, I have something. I think I'd stop here, probably overshot my time. But this is what I've seen across the board.
Thank you, Anita, for giving us a very encouraging and a very hopeful picture. So, Aryaman, how much of what they have spoken about you identify with, and what are your thoughts from your own context and from your friends that you represent, your generation?
Well, I'd say that I could resonate with almost everything that ma'am and sir just said. I was like, how can someone know us so good? Maybe even we don't know ourselves that well. But when we're talking about Gen Z or the values of Gen Z, I think probably the first thing that would come to my mind is that we're born into like the peak technological innovation era. And because of that, we have all become digitally natives. And by digital natives, I don't mean that we are all adept at all forms of technology. But yes, our learning curve is for sure a tad bit faster than what it was in the previous generations, especially when it comes to matters of technology, internet, and social media. Now, apart from being digitally native, that I'll probably discuss in the forthcoming questions, I'd also say that we are much more entrepreneurial in our mindset and much more entrepreneurial in our outlook. So while I was researching for this panel discussion, I found a TED talk in which some statistics were provided. A student had said that almost 86% of Gen Z have said that they want to own their businesses sometime in their career. They want to own startups or organizations, and almost 15% of them have already started it before the age of 18. And I can find that very much practical in my friend circle as well. I have friends that have their businesses already, friends that have started avenues for LGBTQ safe havens. Even I have started an initiative with two of my friends about Indian culture. So that way, I feel that we're much more entrepreneurial in our mindset. And apart from that, I'd also say that we are quite thorough in our research. Now, there's this sort of stereotype that Gen Z is very superficial, and you'll tell them something and then they'll just immediately take it at its face value. Like ma'am said, we do not do that. And I think that arises from the fact that we have the avenues to collect and cross-reference our information. So, for example, I'm preparing for an exam called NEET, which is the pre-medical entrance examination. And it is no longer a one teacher, one student, and one me sort of education. I have teachers from my school. I have a coaching class where teachers teach me. I have multiple sets of books as well as websites where I can get text content. And after all of this, I also have YouTube, which is since every single aspirant would have visited YouTube once in their life, at least to know about strategies, to know about revision modules and everything. So that way, I think we are quite thorough in what we are aiming for, what we want to achieve. And I think ma'am also talked about us sharing parts of our lives. So if someone has stopped an exam, they are very happy to go and share that information with the world, as compared to probably my parents' generation, where if someone knew something special, they'd probably prefer to keep it to themselves. But now we want to share it with everyone so that we can all grow at the same time, at the same pace. And probably one of the last, it is sort of a flip side to Gen Z, is that we are quite impulsive and we have a shorter attention span. certain researchers have also said that our attention span is around 8 seconds. So if you don't appeal to us in 8 seconds, you're going to get swiped out. But impulsive, I wouldn't say impulsive in the sense that we are rash in our decisions. But for sure, that if we believe in something, if we find that something holds true to what we believe, what we represent, or what our values are, then yes, we are going to stick to it and remain adamant to be firm in our position. So I'd say those were the values in from my perspective and my friend's perspective.
Awesome, Aryaman. I wonder what school am I running? 8 seconds attention span, and we have 45 minutes period. But coming back to you, the next question is, very, very wonderfully articulated in terms of profiling the Gen Z from each of your location. And I love some of those, crucial words like, they want flexibility and, they want informality, they want autonomy. So how does this impact your domain? Here is this whole population that's coming into your work space. And how does it impact? Does it impact your productivity? Does it impact your, goal achievements? Does it impact, or do you have to recalibrate a lot of things? Because it's kind of, it's almost like the two sides of the same coin of the good and the bad and the ugly coming together. So how do you galvanize this? So over to you, Nirooban.
Okay. So as each generation, and I like how Dr. Anita Patankar, how you brought this topic with a bit more nuanced. I think when we take a step back, when we look at the boomers, when we look at Generation Y, when we look at Generation Z, all of them came with their level of energy, right? And somehow this has also brought some positive change in the organization. Sometimes the organization had to adapt. Sometimes these new entrants into the labor market also had to adapt themselves. So here what I see is that when you are managing an intergenerational organization like us, you won't be able, and I know that's coming a bit later in our conversation, you won't be able to adapt everything for this new segment of employees you are going to get. But what it pushes us in terms of reflection is that these are people, especially these generations that were entering the market now, as you rightly said, they will be like in their 25 now. What is happening is that they have gone through a very, very tough COVID time. Studying from home, I think every research and every people that we know in that field have been very honest to say that this has been very difficult for generation who is looking for FaceTime study and more maybe hand holding and things like that. Studying from home has been difficult. Then the entrance in the labor market has also been quite bumpy because they had to be onboarded virtually, work from home, find out their ways in terms of how do you induct, how do you make sense of the company has been very, very challenging. So in that sense, now that we are all returning to office, what I can see is that this is a generation which is looking for help. And as corporates, as seniors in the organization, we need to support them in that. How do we do that? I think we need to leverage on some of the good features that you spoke about, Lakshmi, that Anita has spoke about, that Aryaman spoke about, which are around, for example, the fact that they like to be engaged. So engaging through corporate social responsibility because they like to be engaged through purpose is something that's very, very popular. I see that in our organization and also across. I see a lot of them getting involved into things which can impact the society positively. They want to work for an organization which has a mission value, which is working on the rhetorics and also on the realities that, when we say that we are going to be carbon free and things like that, they want to see the impact. And they want to work for organizations which are being positive with the wider ecosystem around us, whether it's the nature, whether it's, the wider society. I see, also them getting involved, as Aryaman said, on greater cause. For example, when I looked at our diversity inclusion agenda, I see more and more people, joining causes like, for example, LGBTQ+, where they want to make an impact. They want to be, see what are the real impact we are bringing towards. They are signing up to be part of the employee resource group. I also see that in disability. Like when we are doing any exclusive drive on disability, they are there. So, we should be leveraging on that. Like rather than just seeing, okay, the short span of attention, things like that, we should be looking at what all the positives they are bringing, to our organization also. In terms of career, I could see that they have came at a time which was quite ambiguous. Okay, so they are much more short-term oriented. So I think for us as corporate, and we are trying to transition to that because that's not easy also, is to look at, how do you engage them through maybe shorter careers, for example, like where they are coming to get an experience through maybe projects. Maybe they can be within the same organization, but be part of multiple different transversal projects within the same teams. Maybe it could be things, for example, different missions. So for example, for 6 months, they could be on a mission. Then for another 6 months, they could be on another mission. And that's also useful because in the current way of doing things in organization, we are also looking at people who can work in an agile mode. Gone are the days where you do like a project planning for so many months, and then you have all these different review meetings and stuff. So that will not attract them. They need to be convinced by their managers, like in your academia, it'll be by the professors, on the credibility, on the knowledge, because as you said, knowledge is everywhere, right? Like it can be on Google, it can be on LinkedIn, it can be on so many medias. So they need to be convinced, and we need to professionalize our managers to be able to address this audience, right? In terms of explaining the why, the what, the how, like how Simon Sinek was explaining to all of us, a while back. But for this generation, that's really, really key. The face-to-face learning, actually, there's a lot of misconceptions saying that, actually the Gen Z just want to work from home. They are happy like that. Actually, okay, on the face value, yes, but remember that's the generation that likes the hyper personalization, that likes the direct contact, that likes the visibility. So the face-to-face learning has been important. And as you said, Dr. Anita, what we notice is that the self-paced learning is quite successful, rather than having them on things, that we have already predefined, giving them choice in which they can basically pick and select, a little bit like how you would make your own salad, right? Like how you can pick and select what kind of learning type and adapt it to their space. And even if they want to do it later in the evening because they are more night people, then that works, rather than having, the usual 9 to 6. So these are different kind of things, that I've seen, where people, were really engaging through that. And also the in-person connect. They like to be part of different events. We noticed that, like from April, we are doing the return to office, right? And we've done different in-person engagement. For example, different team lunch, team dinner, like different kind of things where, we were able to engage people informally like that. That has worked well, where people have came, they have, been much more open, so this is, I think their first experience of working. So I think we should also at our level give them the best out of it and see how we could adapt. But of course, we can't adapt on every streams. But that's there, yeah.
Yeah, I think you
My
pretty
input.
well summarized a lot of shifts that you have had to do in order to accommodate the profile and the key characteristics. So Anita, how does that work for you in your higher education?
So in higher education, I absolutely agree with everything that he said. I just need to keep one thing in mind, is that the adaptation that has taken place in higher education spaces, in many of them, I'm not going to say all of them, definitely at the school that I am at, it's also kind of happened at the same time that industry has started questioning the quality of graduates that Indian higher education has been, creating.
Churning out.
So there has been a lot of debate within the industry and then with us, because we have industry advisors, etc., on our curriculum and other boards, that they don't hit the ground running, right? We need to spend more and more time training them, and that whatever you teach them is great, but not perfect for us. People have gone to the extent of saying that, large percent of Indian graduates were not even employable. So I think in the last 15 to 18 years, there has been pressure put on higher education institutes to start looking at outcomes, learning outcomes, rather than just how many marks did they get and what did you teach. We've had to do a lot of teacher training to shift the focus from teachers teaching to teachers facilitating learning. And this has happened across the board. While this has been happening, I think it's been super successful and effective because Gen Z also brought in its own needs. So what we were able to do, and what many of the colleges that have, and I should also just very quickly put in that so many higher education institutions do not have, I'm going to use the word, the privilege to be able to do a lot of things, because student-teacher ratios in many colleges across the country are so, are horrible,
Yeah.
right? I mean, if a teacher has to teach 100 students, how is that teacher, however good the teacher is, how is the teacher going to bring in creative engagement with them? So, so it is something that an increasing number of people, and the NEP talks about this, so I'm very hopeful for the average educational institution. What did we do? We did a couple of things. The first thing that we did is that we created space for students to be able to contribute to very active feedback and suggestions on what was going to be taught, when they could choose to do it, not just in terms of timing, but which semester. So many courses are offered in all semesters, and you can pick and choose. So the rigidity of the Indian program structure, which used to be, you will study this in semester 1 and you will study that. We've broken that down. And we've said, if you don't want to, these are alternatives from across disciplines. And we looked at courses and we looked at learning outcomes. So the learning outcome was for someone to become adept with quantitative reasoning tools. Then we put together a large variety across disciplines and said students could pick and choose. And I think students have absolutely enjoyed that opportunity to be able to.
Yeah, it's a very beautiful matching you've done.
So that's worked really well. When Aryaman is talking about the attention span, my experience is, if the teacher is boring, if the content is boring, if the content is not relevant, then they would like to, like Tinder, swipe left, swipe right, etc. But if it is content that they understand is relevant to them, then 30 minutes, 40 minutes, they're happy with it. You'll be surprised, Lakshmi, we have 2-hour sessions. Okay? But we've done it in such a way that it is conversation, content, interspersed with a lot of individual and team activities. So you actually are not listening to someone for more than about 10 to 12 to 15 minutes. And that has worked brilliantly well. I think also because we've realized that Gen Z wants to be mobile. Gen Z is aspirational. They want to travel. Cross-cultural, the ability to navigate across geographies and cultures is something that they want. And therefore, we brought that into the pedagogies that we use. They love being on their phones, on their laptops. So many teachers don't really like it. But if that is the way they are comfortable, then you bring in research into the classroom. And you say, quickly go on to this. We use Kahoot and a whole lot of other online quiz things, so that they don't feel, I always feel that they're going to, it's like the umbilical cord getting cut, or, I'm going to have withdrawal symptoms if I don't hold my phone. So give them opportunities, build them in, so that, you say, okay, fine, take out your phones, which otherwise are on silent, take out your phones and let's answer this. I think for us, another big area where I feel students feel happy, and you also have to remember, they're ambitious. For them, their careers are important. In fact, I would say this is the generation that has been the most ambitious with their careers. And of course, for us, careers usually for about 70 to 75% of them means higher education. But they start their planning, their CV and their statement of purpose very, very focused. See, they know lifestyles cost money. The privilege of having choices also costs money. The pride of not living off your parents' money is something that is slowly growing. The people say, I need to be able to. So when he said someone has a startup, yes, more and more people are looking at this because of the pride of doing things, that I'm using my mind to be able to generate. And I need it because that's the lifestyle I want to have. Instant gratification is a fact.
So Aryaman.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Aryaman, when you hear both of them speak about, how there are a lot of adaptations that are happening. And in your mind, are you thinking about, is it the certain kind of Indian Gen Z? Are you also recognizing more and more commonalities with global Gen Z? What kind of profile that you think that they're talking about in terms of adaptation?
Yes, ma'am, I definitely think that a lot of similarities can be drawn over here, especially with regards to being involved in our educational experiences. So one common feature that I found out when I was asking my friends about their opinions, they said that the real fun is being a part of the process of our education. And for that, since I'm a science student, one of our examples over here, we have a chapter of electrostatics in class 12 physics. And to understand electrostatics well, we need to have a good understanding of the concept of mechanics, which is taught in the first semester of class 11. Now, in class 11, not everybody is equally serious about learning those concepts at that moment of time, because it's 11th, we don't have a board exam. Chill, we stay relatively chilled. And because of that, we miss out on quite a few essential concepts that are later required to understand electrostatics well. Now, then again, we can also think of it that everybody has different levels to which they understand mechanics. Maybe somebody has paid attention and knows the concept through and through. Maybe somebody did not pay attention at all and does not know the first word about them. Or maybe someone paid attention for the first 40% of the lectures and then stopped studying or stopped paying attention. So when we all come in 12th, we are all taught electrostatics with that assumption in mind that yes, you all know mechanics through and through, which is not necessarily true. And because of that, we sort of, some of us may not understand what the teacher is teaching in electrostatics at that time. And when we don't understand, we're just tuning out over there. And that probably creates a dynamo effect of not understanding electrostatics, because of which physics, current electricity is not good. And probably 50% of our 12th standard physics is on a very weak base that way. This will then further escalate into probably not getting great marks, and even more than marks, if someone is pursuing engineering in the industry, like sir said, people will find, sir and ma'am said that uh, people are not employable because they've not understood that concept that well. So where I'm getting to is probably from right from when we start a chapter. Maybe if all the teachers could talk to individual students, that's why the teacher-student ratio is also important, and find out where they are uh, on a particular concept. And if there are certain gaps that are there that are found throughout majority of the class, maybe take one or two bridge lessons to bridge that sort of gap, and that will probably make us understand way better. Is what I
No, I get it. What, I'm connecting it to what Nirooban talked about, personalization and yet being very, very flexible. One last question before we just quickly hand it over to Sunita.
Lakshmi?
Yeah.
Sorry, Lakshmi. Yeah, it's just because we said 7:15 is when we open up for an engagement with our audience, I think, who's waiting with many questions. Do you want to go with another round of questions to the panelists, or
Just
shall
the
we open
last
it up?
one more, like
Yeah.
I see that question coming up, and hence I thought, with this Gen Z and workspace and in education, there is an intergenerational dynamics that's happening. So if you were to quickly talk about how do you address that I'm not using the word conflict essentially, but dynamics, how do you kind of, smoothen it over? A very, very quick response from you, Nirooban, and from Anita.
Okay, so more like a fireside, I guess. So what I see is that not really. I don't think we should see this as an opposition, right, between the generation, because I feel there's a lot of complementarity that we could find, and I think we need to think about how do we make. I think for any human resource professional or people in a managerial position in organization, it's about how do you make a cohesive workplace. So I think it's that each of these segment of population need to adapt to each other, right? Like how the boomers in a way adapted together with the generation Y. Now, what we need to see is that within the organization, what can we do for how can senior employees maybe mentor some of these Gen Z, and also we could think about reverse mentoring also, right? Like, because Dr. Anita, you were saying that they are well versed with social media in particular, with all these new aspects of technology. So how, like we could cross fertilize knowledge, right, between both of each generation. So this is one of it. Maybe things we talk a lot about communication, through our Gen Z, but they communicate well through instant messaging. And maybe, the boomers or the Gen Y have other communication skill set about how you address, an issue with a client or with a senior stakeholder. How do you influence, these influencing skills? I think the boomers and the Generation Y have all these good influencing skills. A workplace can also be quite political at times. So how do you adapt? And how do you become a bit more politically astute? So there's all this knowledge that actually the boomers and the Gen Y have that, the Gen Z can benefit from. And from the Gen Z, I think it's about they are tech savvy, like I think if I could put it this way. So around the social media, around, the ability to understand things very quickly also about some of the issues. Sometimes maybe they could be also sometimes a bit more efficient in my view in the way they'll be managing, like you took the example of an Excel, but maybe because they are coming, quite soon. And what I see is that many of them, although sometimes they might not have learned it at the university or at the school, they would have gone through some external courses, and there's a lot of it in India. I think we are blessed with that, right? Like with different Excel trainings and things like that. So sometimes they do some short courses, and then maybe they are better at doing maybe a pivot table or whatever, and they are much more, efficient that way. So sometimes things that would have taken much more longer for someone else to do, maybe they are faster in doing that. So maybe they don't need to be sitting there for 8 hours. So, so then maybe the other generation need to understand that it's not because they are not valuing presenteeism. And it's fine if they are leaving a bit earlier, if they have already done their work or whatever. So I think it's a mutual understanding. It's like what happens at home, right? So we need to instill that culture, that mutual culture of understanding. This would be
Yeah, and I love the way that you spoke about not to view them as some kind of an opposite dimension, but more complementing and also probably very, very cohesive and making it as a wholesome. Anita, before you respond to Aryaman, how common do you think that you can identify with the global Gen Z? You are an Indian Gen Z. Do you think you have more common with the across the world of your generation than, let's say, with my generation?
Yes, ma'am. I definitely think that is the case. And especially because we are sort of much more connected with other people. And for example, in one of our sessions in school that was on multi-faith prayer, one of the speakers there had said that Gen Z as a generation are all global citizens. We cannot differentiate. We can definitely differentiate ourselves, but we cannot hold ourselves aloof as if we are Indian, you are an American. So there are a lot of similarities that we find amongst us, and specifically with regards to social causes. So, for example, if we take the cause of environment and climate change, on a global scale and an Indian scale, we have had so many members of Gen Z who are actively working towards climate change and bringing sustainable development goals. And out of those, certain names, like for example, Greta Thunberg she has used the power of social media to sort of spread the message all over the world. And because of her campaign at that moment, a lot of parliament started debating about using about working towards sustainable development goals. And I think that's where maybe not all of us are working in the same manner, but our goals, our broader perspectives are quite aligned in terms of what we want an ideal world to look like. An ideal world where probably there is not uh, as much of pollution, as much of climate change, as much of inequalities that are present today. So I think in that
Beautiful.
sense, yes, we are definitely quite aligned to the global Gen Z as well.
Beautiful. So, Anita, over to you in terms of the generational dynamics, because your answers are pretty much aligned with the school education too. Yeah.
I think the key to ensuring that there's less conflict and a lot of collaboration is for the older generation to respect Gen Z in the classroom, in the corridors. And I've seen that. Of course, it's a very experiential program. So therefore, we look at ourselves as, co-facilitators, or that this is a co-constructed learning environment. But I think the pandemic was a great time when so many of my faculty who are brilliant teachers in the classroom suddenly had to shift online. And I knew that they were reaching out to students, because when students make presentations, which student is good at, at which visual presentation style, etc. And then suddenly I noticed all these teachers having wonderful visual material. I said, which Coursera course did you do already? No, I just took a quick tutorial from XYZ student. And I saw that happening a lot. Students take care of the SSLA Insta page. They come up to me and they say, you know what, ma'am, you don't have the time for it. Let us do it. Let us run it. We will teach you. And I think the minute you show them that we respect you, you are different. Doesn't mean you don't have values. You have different values. Maybe. And therefore no judgment, which I think sometimes the older generation sometimes doesn't get, that just because someone lives or makes different life choices, we don't understand it, and therefore we feel, Indian culture is eroding, etc., etc. I said the minute that respect comes in, so now I don't see, I'm 60 plus, and I see TV shows that my students see. I make an effort actually. And they will say, oh, do we need to see that guide, and is it good, and am I going to get bored? We're on the same page. I think colleges and schools have a unique opportunity that probably workplaces don't have, that our goals in interacting with students are very different. Our goals at the end of the day is to help the person become a better adjusted human in their personal and professional lives. The stress of the bottom line and deliverables in terms of are not something that are with us. So we have those 4 years, and students have done that. I think the other thing where we've learned a lot, sometimes when I'm walking in the corridors, I'll see a slightly older faculty member, and we've got faculty from 35, to 65, right? They'll be sitting with a group of students, and the students are happily, patiently explaining to them what every alphabet in the LGBTQ plus means. They'll give examples, and I see these teachers. Of course, teachers are a different
generation.
segment. It's also a different segment, right? We're so very conscious that if students can't learn from us, I'm ineffective, right? So I see that happening. So the and this is the feedback that I got from organizations where students have worked for internships as well, is that we're absolutely delighted that they respect the older generation for certain things. Like, for example, when SOPs and formal communication has to be written, they will come with their drafts, they will sit with faculty. When it comes to shorter, the promotion material, they'll come to a teacher and say, can I help? Can I help you? Can I take care of this for you? So I think that's working out really, really well. There are some things that they're good at, and we're happy to learn. And I think that respect of each other's strengths and positions, I think it's very, for example, mental health issues. The young generation is so much more aware. I'm not going to say that they're committed to it, because I think they're still struggling with a lot, but they're definitely more aware of this. And I think in their own way, they're helping faculty, staff members, more than faculty, the staff members to understand what is this. So in that sense, I think it's good. I'm very hopeful and optimistic.
Yeah.
And I don't
think,
I think that this topic is really can take maybe 2 days to talk about.
Yeah, we spoke about it.
Yeah, and I think just because we should be also looking at what our participants are asking, and then ensuring that our panelists can go. Nirooban, there's a question coming right at you there. At the workplace, is the concept of hierarchy fading away in the Indian workplace, or is it still very strong?
Unfortunately not. I think, across the board, when I look at different organizations, I see that, hierarchy remains. hierarchy remains through, what we call the corporate titles, right? Like where people start, at an associate level one, senior associate, assistant vice president, vice president. So you can go on like that. And I think this is something that is still very valued. Because we're also operating in a system where people see this as an evolution, right? As a kind of vertical movement they are having, and I think it's part of the value systems. Even if the employee might be ready, I think, to let it go, the wider ecosystem in which he's living, right? Maybe people in his family, his neighbors, everybody is going through that system, right? So I think there's a peer pressure to keep. And I could see that this is something that people are still very much interested. But then it depends, on your each of the managers in an organization to see, how do I want to operate? Do I want to have an open door office? Do I want to work closer with my team? Do I want to be really hands-on? I think it's something that people can do. But what I see, I don't see, these hierarchies fading away that easily, to be fair with you.
Thank you, Niru. Perhaps also a question for Vincent. You are not on chat. Do you want to open up and ask, Vincent? Because I think that most of Padma Kumar's and maybe Navkaran, most of your questions have been answered. So maybe Vincent, did you want to say something?
Yes, please. Can you hear me?
Yes, Vincent, all the way from the Netherlands, we can hear you.
Yes, you can hear me. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Sunita. First of all, thank you to all the organizer presenters. Thank you for your excellent input. Yeah, I have a few questions. I thought it would be easier to avoid them than just to write them. It's a bit long.
Do you want to switch on your camera? Vincent, do you want to switch on your camera, Vincent?
Oh, yes, if it's possible, sure, yeah. Yes, you see me. Yeah. Okay, thank you. All right.
Hi, Vincent. Hi.
Hello. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Yeah. Yeah. Quickly, my question. The more I was listening to you, and okay, first of all, as Sunita was saying, I teach in a technical university in the Netherlands, and as expectedly, you can imagine, we have lots of Indian students, bright young men and bright young women. Of course, an elite, but that's where it is. So the more I was listening to you, and it's been also confirmed by our young fellow here. Sorry, I can't see your name. It's a bit complicated. It was confirmed by you. The more I was listening to you, and the more I was thinking, they are just like all the other generations in the world, because they are mobile, they want to travel, they see online as the extension of themselves. They have the fragmented life, they are this part of this ZEP culture, a bit of this, a bit of that, lacking an important focus, fragmented life. They won't have employment for life. They will work 3 years here, 5 years there, etc. Okay, so I can go on and on. I think we all see what I'm talking about. So I was thinking, they're all the same. But I have now a few questions. I think there are differences. First of all, they are a lot more individualistic than their parents are. I think that's for sure. They still stick together, Indian community on campus, clearly, but they're still individually a lot more individualistic. That's a clear thing. And then I'd like to ask the panel about, this is not professional, but it's about marriage, because I have a few interesting situations that I've seen. I'm coaching professional doctorate PhD students, and I have two examples. One, a guy that I know quite well came up to me and said, "Oh yeah, by the way, this is my wife." And I said, "Okay, now nice to see you." I mean, I had never heard of him having a wife. All of a sudden, there was a wife in his life. So I thought, okay, I'm not maybe arranged marriage. It is still Generation Z. I know it's very often a question of origin, ethnic group, a caste, a social class. I know that, but still. So a young, very bright fellow. All of a sudden, he had this wife with him. And then the other extreme, in a way, is that many of the girls tell me, young women, tell me, I cannot go back to India because I don't fit in the setting anymore. I will have to stay here in Europe, and have my life here. I just don't fit anymore back home. So that's what I wanted to confront the panel with this, my experiences of marriage and fitting back into the Indian mold. I know it's a mosaic, but still some kind of Indian mold for young generation, men, women, etc. That's part of my experience. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm not sure it's just about the Gen Z aspect. It's also the way that Indian girls, the way that they have gone far ahead in terms of their process of socialization, personal freedom, and thought processes and higher education, ambitions and aspirations, versus the Indian young male hasn't gone through the same kind of depatriarchalizing, if there is a word like that. I think it's this whole misalignment of the growth process that's there, whether they are living abroad or whether they're living in India. And I see that with a lot of young girls not wanting to because they don't genuinely feel that the boys are all there ready.
If I may just add in, I totally agree with Lakshmi. This is something that we think about and talk about a lot. And in fact, we were talking a few days ago that we need to do some workshops, for parents who have, we do workshops for parents who have young adults, but the male child, because you're absolutely right. Girls are socialized and girls are introduced to the world, and, the concept of them having choice and agency, and depatriarchalizing the world. But in addition to that, I also feel that India and Asian countries, and I can speak about India, is also very different. And this is where one big thing, I don't see Gen Z in India like Gen Z abroad. Because Gen Z in India, the kind of Gen Z that we're talking about,
and also the diverse Gen Z,
are all going to college that their parents have paid for. We hardly have any students who work and fund their education themselves, and therefore parental choice is still a big thing. So the privilege that our young adults, especially from urban centers, have rests on the fact that their parents are in sync with their aspirations. When parents are not in sync with their aspirations, then there is conflict in the home. And that risk aversion is a part of the Indian Gen Z. And they struggle with it. Because in the classroom, while they're learning through sociology and psychology and gender studies and philosophy, they're learning about autonomy and they're learning about independence. And honestly speaking, the commercialization that capitalism brings in, and the mobility that has come in, joint families having broken down, a whole lot of reasons, leads people to becoming more and more individualistic. But how is that possible when you're going to struggle if your parents are not supporting you? So I see this as a conflict as well, the ability to go against the family. And usually the family puts their foot down in marriage and in careers. I mean, higher education, careers less, higher education.
Studies, yeah.
So it's a struggle, and in that sense, I feel Gen Z in India has this additional pressure.
And also, I think just to elaborate,
please go ahead.
Just to add to that, this whole generalization itself is very dangerous, because a tier 2, tier 3 Gen Z are very, very, very
different. This is what I was going to say. We need to bring a bit more nuance to that.
Yes,
because it's true that the Gen Z we are talking about here, we are talking about the urban people, who are belonging, to the higher social economic side, who are, as you say, Lakshmi, privileged, right? So basically, and also if they can go and study abroad, that represents a huge investment for the family. And we are talking about cultures here which are very much embedded into collectivism, across consensus, so parents and children are one, actually, and the value systems around, of course, religion, wedding, all these kind of things are quite ingrained. So this is something that's difficult, and I know where you're coming from. And these are different perspectives. I remember that when I was living in France, I was living with my parents, whilst I was also working at a corporate. And for many of my colleagues, and this is a personal experience I'm sharing, it was very bizarre. They were like, how could you be, working and at the same time still with your parents. You should have your own accommodation, you should have your own flat. And I lived with them until I was 30, until I got married, and for them it was really a shocker. But taking a step back, that's a different culture. Okay,
Yes.
these are different cultures we are all evolving in. So what could be right for some of my colleagues, in the way they were approaching it might be different in my own value system, where, your parents are there, they support you, and it's something that's a privilege also that I felt to be with them, because you don't have to take care of many things, because they are there to support, and that all works like that. And also I knew that when I will grow older, then I'll take care of them. So that's a cycle. That's a cycle where you follow in a way the advice, because they are seen as the guru in a way also, right? So you can argue with them, you can have a lot of disputes also, but at the same time, this is one. Yeah. So this would be my personal input on this.
Yeah.
So we have
There
a
are
couple
two
of
more questions.
Yeah. Go
Yeah,
ahead, Sunita.
Lakshmi.
Sunita,
Yeah.
could
So,
answer Bindu's question? Bindu says, what
Yes,
percentage
please.
is still largely? Very quickly, Bindu, large percentage, either because of financial or because of emotional. See, a lot of children today, especially in urban spaces, are so conscious of the fact that their parents are supporting them to become independent, are supporting them, for example, putting them into a liberal arts college, okay, investing in their education, investing in encouraging them to grow wings, and fly. And I think that sense, and I've seen that as a sense of gratitude, right, is that how can I go against my parents? They've done so much for me. And, that emotional bond. Today, parents are friendly parents, where a large number of parents are also learning, because they've also gone through the fear of, so many cases that we keep hearing about, children not able to resolve the conflict within the family, and then all those spillovers, that we talk about, fears that parents have. So I think today parents are also taking an extra effort to become friendly, to open up. And I think that bond is very strong and it's culturally also very, very, very strong.
Yeah. I think
Um,
there's a question by Shiv, Lakshmi. Sorry, do you want to read that, Lakshmi?
yeah.
Shiv
Are
and
you talking
Kendra.
about
Yeah.
Reggie's one? Are you talking
No,
about that?
I'm talking about Shiv
The
Kumar,
multitasking.
the multitasking one. Yes.
Yeah. So maybe Aryaman, if you could respond to that, also sometimes I think you need to kind of claim your space here with all the adults talking around.
Yes,
So
and this is about Gen Z. Yes, go ahead.
yeah, so Aryaman, the question is that the Gen Z is very good in multitasking, and could any of the panel highlight the advantage of the Gen Z have it as a major differentiator? Because we get irritated with you not having the focus, that you're simultaneously on gadgets and simultaneously chatting, and a lot of time doing things together. So how do you think it's an advantage, or do you think it's a differentiator for your generation?
Yes, ma'am. For sure, I do think it is a big advantage in terms of the timelines of our general life of a Gen Z person. Now, in our previous generation, so like for example, in my father or mother or grandparents' generation, having your own personal brand as yourself as a brand, it started once you've graduated and you've started in a job. Then you start developing a sort of personality that you can totally claim as your own. In case of Gen Z, because we start multitasking at a very young age, sort of we can say that our brand building starts right from the age of maybe 10 or 11, where we get much more autonomy than what our parents used to get. For example, even a 10-year or 11-year-old now makes his or her own choices as to what they want to wear. Now, as we grow old, maybe at the age of 16, 17, our careers have become largely about what we want to do versus what our parents or what our family wants to do. These are sort of shifts that have come because of the sort of multitasking that we do. Our parents, they get the confidence that yes, we have seen that these students can work hard. So we have that much trust that whichever career they'll go for, they will excel in that, or they will at least make a mark for themselves. And probably another, bringing back a point that we had started off with about Gen Z being much more entrepreneurial, I think that stems as a very important factor in this case, because we are no longer defining entrepreneurship as having your own venture or having your own startup. You can be the product yourself. It's about
Wow.
us who we are trying to sell.
Oh,
So I think that's
lovely.
why we are entrepreneurial in our mindset, and that multitasking gives us the bigger advantage in that case.
That's, I think, a phenomenal summary of we can be
Yeah.
our product.
Yeah.
Very well said.
I don't know how we are going to bring this to an end, but Neeru has to leave as well. So I think we should be saying thank you to everybody. There is one more question, Neeru. If you have to leave, we completely understand. I wonder if Anita and if Aryaman want to answer the point of Kendra, who says that she's very happy to see that there is so much awareness and work done in the space of LGBTQ plus. So would you want to add a word about that? Either Aryaman or Anita?
So my students are very active. We also, of course, have, like I said, sometimes students self-select themselves to institutions. We offer a specialization in women and gender studies. So in that sense, I don't think this should be a generalization for Gen Z. But
Yeah.
I do see an increasing interest in becoming aware of what is happening in the world. I think they want to talk about equity. They want to talk about diversity, because I think they all realize that while these are difficult conversations, Gen Z has gone one step beyond their previous generation. That they can read the theories associated with it and understand it. They can have a conversation and a discussion about it. I think going to the next step in terms of actually living with it, they struggle as much as any other generation. When a student comes out, there will be the same 20% that used to be accepting of diversity. That percentage is still 20%. What is the shift? The shift is in, I want to find out more. This is now a part of the life that I'm going to lead and the organizations that I'm going to be a part of. And therefore, I want to know more. I'm not running away from it. So this Gen Z is pushing parents also, pushing teachers also. So I think that is huge. And then to understand that, I think they're ready. They run clubs, associations, they work with NGOs, so I think they're taking that step. So knowing more, spending time with them, understanding. And I think that's probably Gen Z's another important feature, that they're quicker than us to accept some of the changes, good, bad, ugly, that are happening in the world. And they're happier to accept and say, okay, fine, I'm not going to be able to change this. Now, let me learn how to understand and respect it. I think that's what I see amongst a larger number of Gen Z.
So one last interesting question that I think maybe we can just take it with Aryaman. Somebody has asked about, are Gen Z more nationalist than the other generations?
Yeah, that's Reggie, and he's actually shared some research that says that in other cultures, Gen Z tends to be more nationalistic. So
okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was just looking at the chat, and he or she has asked that, is Gen Z more nationalist, thus less global? And sort of differing opinion, but I feel that we don't need to choose any one side. We can be more nationalist and we can still be global. We don't need to choose on one end, because now I think compared to like maybe 1940s or 1950s, when the world was just fresh out of World War II, or probably in the 1970s, 80s, when like the Cold War and all was very much fresh, very much alive. I think at this point, being nationalistic is also quite aligning towards the goals of the entire planet. So, for example, I would want India to be extremely would want India to not have the disastrous effects of global warming. Neither would I want anyone in the world to face those effects. But that being said, for sure, there are certain differences where nations need to keep their individual interests in mind while speaking on the global forum. And in those cases, I feel it's again a matter of nuance. There cannot be one certain answer that we are more nationalist and less global. That is what I feel.
Thank you.
So maybe I will share a Menti, perhaps just to get a one what you say, one word to kind of summarize our discussion today. So kindly just bear with me for a moment. Oops, you're getting to see all my rubbish on the computer. and I don't get my Menti. I think I may have closed it by mistake. So I'm clearly not Gen Z. I'm clearly not good at multitasking. So I think I'll let the Menti go. So maybe in the chat, everybody, just one word to summarize your takeaway or your impression of our panel discussion today. Shukriya, says Vincent. Thank you. So just the last word to end our session today. Insightful, helpful. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Lakshmi.
I just want
Wonderful
to
moderator.
leave you with this thought, Sunita, all of you. You know, when the musician Elton John and Tim Rice penned this Wait for the King, I just can't wait to be the king in 1994. Little would they have thought that it could define a generation to be born the next year. The song later adapted into 2019 movie Lion King is almost like an ode to the youthful arrogance and impatience, something that this generation would actually go beyond without any doubt. So thank you so much for this amazing contribution, conversation. And I'm sorry, I know that this is a topic I mentioned to Sunita that we need 2 days seminar deliberations because we're also talking about 3 different perspectives of stakeholders. So maybe we will go back to seminar space again to discuss this. So thank you and have a lovely day, lovely evening. Thank you.
Thank you to our wonderful panelists, Dr. Anita and Lakshmi. You did a fabulous job, really, of bringing out the essential with, what could last 2 days. You did it in an hour and a half, So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you so much. And wonderful to meet you,
Thank
Aryaman. All the very best.
Thank
This is
you.
a topic for the
you.
next CETA India Congress.
Yes,
Yeah.
we are working towards it. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank
yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Thank
I have
you.
to go. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aryaman. Thank you, Anita. Brilliant sharing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye-bye, Aryaman. All the best.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
You should look at a career in diplomacy.
You won't believe it, Anita.
The last answer he gave.
You won't believe it. This is like, absolute providence calling. I had told him this after this TEDx, that you would make an excellent career in diplomacy.
Yeah.
And I told him probably and his TED talk was so fantastic, so good, so good.
I look forward. Send me the link or tell me when it goes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and it was really fun being here.
Thank you, Aryaman. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.